Young bride, Anni Dewani, on her South African honeymoon, hours before her death. Her wedding had been a lavish affair. Her murder was squalid and remains a mystery. This CCTV, never seen before, shows Anni's husband, Shrien Dewani, moments after learning his wife of just 2 weeks had been killed.
When we found out that Anni had been shot, apparently I just started screaming hysterically.
The same man, South African police say, paid hitmen to execute his wife.
I'm not a legal expert, but what we know that he did partake in the killing of the wife.
Anni's family are devastated and they're desperate for Shrien to go back to South Africa and stand trial.
He must give us the answers. He must go to South Africa and tell us what happened.
In July, a British judge ruled Shrien must go. But what evidence does South Africa have that Shrien Dewani was behind Anni's killing? Panorama's obtained the police files and given them to leading forensics experts to review. Their findings are damning.
I would veer towards an accidental discharge rather than a deliberate shooting.
What the South Africans have not done is to carry out any experiments to support the conclusions that they came to. They've made some guesses.
This is not an investigation that would meet the standards in this country. There is simply a cloud of suspicion hanging over him rather than any evidence that he was involved.
It raises serious doubts about the integrity of the South African criminal justice system, doubts shared by some insiders.
It's like, we've got to nail somebody, so let's just go for it.
So is Shrien Dewani a cold-blooded killer, or, as he claims, an innocent man?
I just got married to the girl of my dreams. Why would I want to kill her?
Today is the 14th of 11th, 2010. We are here in Singolonati Street, where a murder victim was found in a car, abandoned.
Anni Dewani had been shot through the neck, left to bleed to death in the back of a hijacked taxi. It was hours before she was found.
The charges against you is one of murder, armed robbery and kidnapping.
At an identity parade 2 weeks after her death, 3 local men behind the killing were picked out. All 3 have since been convicted, but the South Africans believe one man is missing from this lineup: Anni's husband, Shrien Dewani. The case against Shrien: he lands in Cape Town with Anni and in little more than 1 hour arranges his wife's murder with a taxi driver. 30 hours later, Anni was dead.
Dewani is wanted in South Africa for the alleged murder.
The idea that Shrien organized the killing has generated huge interest all over the world.
Well, the Dewani story has not only dominated headlines here in South Africa.
In fact, South African police and prosecutors seem to have made up their minds already.
This is a pure criminal matter of somebody that murdered his wife when he should have been celebrating a honeymoon.
But is this case really so clear-cut?
Welcome to the Cape Race Hotel, and please enjoy your stay with us.
Thanks a lot.
You're welcome.
During a Panorama investigation into Anni's killing broadcast last year, I discovered significant cracks in the South African version of events. CCTV filmed here at their hotel, the Cape Grace, revealed a couple seemingly in a loving relationship.
This is, in a way, the couple whose story has not been told in the accounts of these events so far.
Until our program, none of this CCTV had been shown in public before. Since Panorama revealed these pictures, we've gained access to hours more unseen CCTV from the honeymooners' hotel. As we'll see later, it gives further insight into key moments of the case. But to really test the South African evidence against Shrien Dewani, you need to examine what is known as the docket, the South African police's secret file on the murder of Anni Dewani. Panorama has obtained it. The docket contains all the prosecution's evidence, seen here for the first time. Video confessions from the gunman.
Did you establish if she was alive or not?
Forensic evidence.
One spent cartridge from the scene.
Scenes of crime photographs, witness statements, phone and financial records. In fact, the entire South African prosecution case, according to leaked documents Panorama has also seen. It's up to a judge to find Shrien Dewani guilty or innocent. But do these South Africans have credible evidence he was behind the killing? We put it to the test. The last fortnight of Anni's life began with her wedding. And it was spectacular, lasting 3 days, costing upwards of £150,000. They'd known each other for 18 months and been engaged for 5. But Anni's family say the smiles were a mask.
Things changed between the engagement and the wedding. They got more problems within the relationship. He was controlling. And I think that she didn't really like that.
Anni herself revealed doubts as the wedding drew closer. The police files contain texts she was sending a relative.
Fighting a lot with Shrien. Wish I had never got engaged. We have nothing in common. He's a perfectionist. Hate him.
The volatile state of the relationship forms a key part of the prosecution. The 28-year-old had even said she wanted a divorce just days before the honeymoon. But the couple flew to South Africa as planned, spending 4 days at the luxury Chitwa Chitwa Safari Lodge. While there, Anni texted again.
I'm really trying. He's a nice guy in all the ways, but I don't feel happy at all.
Then, just a day later...
It's going better than before. Hard to explain, but I'll call you as soon as I return. Hate the word divorce.
Which sounds like a dramatic easing of the tension between them on the eve of the next stage of their honeymoon. The next day, safari over, they flew to Cape Town. And now begins the chain of events which will end Anni's life and see Shrien accused of ordering her murder. We'll piece together that crucial 30 hours. As the couple left the domestic terminal, taxi driver Zola Robert Tongo was among the crowd. 30 at the time, he'd just one conviction for driving without a taxi permit. We've used an actor to read extracts from Tongo's full police statement. It's never been heard in public before.
At the time I was chatting to another shuttle operator. Dewani approached us to ask us where he could find a taxi.
Tongo is the South African's star witness. Having struck a plea bargain for a reduced sentence, he will testify that Shrien Dewani hired him to arrange Anni's execution. Tongo's taxi was cheap, and he was eager to be of service. Shrien Dewani was impressed.
He spoke good English. He seems trustworthy. The car seems secure.
Before his arrest in December 2010, Shrien Dewani spoke to the Sun about his wife's death.
He showed us around the sites that were there to see between the airport and the hotel. We became quite jovial with him.
It took Tongo about 25 minutes to drive the couple to their hotel, the Cape Grace on Cape Town's waterfront. While Annie went inside to check in, Tongo says Shrien Dewani, who remember he'd only just met, hung back and said he wanted someone taken off the scene.
Dewani said that he wanted somebody to be killed. I said to him that I do not associate myself with such things, but I could call somebody in the township that may know somebody.
Shrien joined Annie at the hotel check-in before stepping out to meet Tongo again for just under 9 minutes. Shrien Dewani maintains he and Tongo simply discussed the couple's tour plans.
Dewani said that he was willing to pay an amount of 15,000 rand and could pay them in dollars. He said that the person that had to be killed was a woman and that she was arriving later that evening.
If Annie was the target, why didn't Shrien simply identify her immediately, especially if he wanted her dead the next night?
What it suggests is that he arrived in a foreign country with no pre-planning, no understanding of how he might go about this, and yet he simply asks a taxi driver that he has never met before and encounters randomly to engage in a conspiracy to kill his wife.
Professor Fraser has reviewed the South African police files for us over 3 months. One of the country's top forensic scientists, he's routinely called in by the Home Office to advise on high-profile murder investigations like the Damilola Taylor case.
This is not an investigation that would meet the standards in this country. This is not what would be considered to be good practice. There are many things that fall a long way short of effective investigation.
After leaving the couple at the hotel, the taxi driver, Tongo, headed to the Protea Coliseum Hotel, a 20-minute drive from the Cape Grace. On the way, Tongo rang the Coliseum. From the South African police files, we have the CCTV, which show receptionist Monde Mblombo answering the phone. Mblombo is the middleman, the link between Tongo and the men who shot Annie. Without him, Annie's killing could never have happened, and yet Mblombo has been given complete immunity from prosecution if he tells the truth about his role. But as we'll discover, he is a liar. While Tongo was on his way to meet the middleman, we now know from unseen Cape Grace CCTV obtained by Panorama that Shrien left Annie in their room and walked out of the hotel. Over at the Coliseum, Tongo is pleased to see the receptionist Mblombo. He puts his hands to his head, a local sign of celebration, and they go outside.
I informed Monde that I picked up a client from the airport and that he wanted somebody taken off the scene and was willing to pay 15,000 rand. Monde said that he knew of a guy in the township and offered to contact him.
According to their testimony, in less than 2.5 minutes, first-time killers Tongo and Mblombo agree to organize Annie's execution. Tongo brushes aside Mblombo's colleague when she asks what's going on. Is this really the start of a plot as they claim to have Annie killed? They're clearly up to something, but is it murder? In the back office, Mblombo gets a number up on his phone so he can call an old friend, Umziwamadoda Kwabe, an unemployed 25-year-old from Cape Town's townships. Again, an actor reads his words.
Monde told me there's a job that needs to be done, but he cannot go into detail.
Like Tongo, Kwabe has struck a deal for a reduced sentence and will give evidence against Shrien Dewani.
Monde gave me Kwabe's mobile telephone number. Monde stated that he wanted 5,000 rand for organizing Kwabe.
Monde, the receptionist, denies wanting payment.
There is a difference in getting money when somebody has been killed. I would call that blood money. So I was not expecting anything from that.
But after Tongo leaves, Mblombo seems more than happy about what's gone on. Does this look like a man who's just arranged a murder? The middleman, who has no previous convictions, will also testify against Shrien Dewani in any trial. He still enjoys immunity from prosecution and remains a free man.
The prosecution have got to be very, very careful with what witnesses they use, because you are actually dealing with people who are criminals, and they are going to be there to try and save their own bacon.
Just about the time Tongo left the Coliseum Hotel, new footage reveals Shrien Dewani returning to the Cape Grace. He'd been to a bureau de change, changing £800 into South African rand, and he'd been shopping for a red rose for his bride. 5 minutes after Shrien arrived back at their room, Annie spoke to her parents.
It wasn't her voice. It wasn't normal Annie. I found something is not okay.
It was the last time they ever spoke. Across town, taxi driver Zola Tongo, now back home, called the hijacker Kwabe.
Tongo told me a person wanted somebody to be killed and asked if I can do the job. When I received the call, I was with my friend called Kolele Mungeni.
Kolile Mungeni, the second gunman. Now disabled by a brain tumor, he's the only one of those accused of killing Annie who's never implicated Shrien Dewani and has rejected a plea bargain. At his trial last year, Mungeni was found guilty of being Annie's murderer. The evidence of Kwabe, the other gunman, was key.
Mungeni and I discussed the matter in more detail. He suggested we agree to do the job for 15,000 rand.
The prosecution's case is that in just 2 calls, one lasting 79 seconds and one lasting 41, the taxi driver Tongo had hired Annie's killers. As a plot formed around them, new CCTV shows Shrien and Annie heading for the bar before going for a meal a short walk from the hotel. The waitress who served the couple remembers their evening at this sushi restaurant.
Not your typical honeymoon table. I've served quite a few honeymoon tables, and they're normally very much in love, hugging, kissing. It wasn't really the case here.
The next time Clara Jane went to serve them, Shrien Dewani wasn't there. She says Annie told her he'd gone to make a business call.
A lot of people commented about this man who was gone, leaving this lady on their honeymoon.
But new CCTV shows Shrien Dewani had left his phone at the hotel and went back to get it. As he arrived at his room, we now know from phone records he discovered a text message from Tongo. Shrien then called the taxi driver. They spoke for 5 minutes and 26 seconds.
There's really no evidence that directly implicates Dewani in this crime. But the evidence that is most convincing, or suggestive is perhaps the best word, is the frequency and timing of the phone calls.
So what did Shrien Dewani and Tongo talk about? The couple's tour itinerary or Annie's murder?
I informed Dewani that I had spoken to a friend and he had identified somebody that could do the job, and that the man was willing to do it for 15,000.
The person who is crucial to understanding Shrien Dewani's engagement here is Shrien Dewani himself. Only he can explain these suspicious calls, which are the only evidence that seems to suggest his involvement.
Shrien Dewani has offered to be interviewed by South African police here in the UK, but so far they've declined.
Surely you must take up that offer. Go and interview him and just check up on what he has to say. And then make a decision, because you've got then his version of events. Is there sufficient evidence to carry on with this trial?
New CCTV shows the couple got back to the hotel after 11. Given what he's accused of, a smiling Shrien makes an unfortunate gesture. Anni doesn't seem to react. Shrien Dewani did not gain financially from Anni's death. The South Africans believe there was a different motive: Shrien's sexuality. This is the German master, a male prostitute based in the Midlands, real name Leopold Leiser, who's given a statement saying Shrien was his client.
The German master's evidence for me is amongst the most credible aspects of this case, and perhaps the only evidence that in some way provides clear motivation for Shrien Dewani to be involved in this conspiracy.
Leiser says he sees lots of married men and has told of 3 sexual encounters with Shrien, the last a month before Shrien and Anni got engaged.
He said that she was a nice, lovely girl and that he liked her, but that he could not break out of it in any way because he would be disowned by the family. He also said that he needs to find a way out of it.
So this does fill in the search for motive.
To be very clear about this, I think this provides sufficient motivation, but motivation isn't evidence in itself. So we would still be looking for evidence of Shrien's direct involvement here.
Whether or not Shrien Dewani is gay or bisexual, we can reveal medical records from just days before the honeymoon show the couple were actively trying for a baby. The day Anni died, they both appeared carefree as they headed down for a late breakfast. Tongo says he heard from Shrien.
Dewani called me at about 11:30 a.m. He asked me to pick him up at the hotel.
But phone records in the police docket show there was no call.
We know that this is simply not true.
So it worries you that something, even one thing that Tongo says, is untrue. That starts to worry you.
A single thing that was inconsequential, even a number of things that were inconsequential, wouldn't worry me. But there are really quite a few things here which are plainly untrue.
Half an hour after the phantom phone call, Tongo arrived at the Cape Grace to pick up Shrien.
He asked me to take him somewhere where he could exchange dollars.
Tongo took him to a black market money exchange just up the road from the Cape Grace. The Golden Touch Jewelers. The owner has told South African police Shrien Dewani exchanged $1,500 for 10,200 rand. If Shrien Dewani did exchange US dollars at the Golden Touch Jewelers, and if we add that to the pounds sterling he'd already cashed up on honeymoon, he would have had 21,500 rand, more than enough to pay for the killing. And yet the money trail could be a massive problem for South African prosecutors.
There's enormous questions around the money. It's one of the holes in the case in terms of a credible conspiracy.
After Shrien picked up the 10,000 rand, about £900, there's no proof it was ever handed over to the gunman.
The money just seems to vanish. It no longer seems to feature either in the physical carrying out of the crime or the post-crime benefits.
We know from the data roaming records of Shrien Dewani's mobile phone that Tongo headed straight back to the Cape Grace Hotel. During the 10-minute journey, Tongo claims Shrien told him how he wanted the hijack carried out.
Both he and I should be thrown out of the vehicle, after which the guy must kidnap and rob the client before she was murdered.
This is one of the very difficult and almost unfathomable parts of the case, is that there wasn't sufficient time between these two men to really plan anything tight, and so much was left apparently to chance.
Dewani offered to pay me 5,000 rand after the job, and he confirmed that he would pay the guy doing the job 15,000 in cash.
Tongo's former boss told us the taxi driver's monthly wages were 2 to 3 times the 5,000 rand, or £450, Shrien Dewani was apparently offering him.
We agreed that I would pick him and the lady up from the Cape Grace Hotel at 7:30 that evening.
After Tongo dropped Shrien off at the Cape Grace Hotel, he picked up the middleman, Mblombo, and gave him a lift to work at the Coliseum's reception.
I asked Tongo why he needed a hitman, and he said that there was a guy that wanted to have his wife murdered.
Is this really the first time Mblombo has asked why Tongo needs a hitman?
Tongo's phone rings, and he said to me, this is the guy on the phone. And all I could hear was Tongo say, yeah, I'm on my way, I'm on my way. And then he puts the phone down, and he says, "Eesh, this guy does not trust me."
Yet the phone records in the police files reveal Shrien Dewani made no such call to Tongo. So Mblombo is lying. Shrien Dewani now had 10,000 rand, £900 in cash. So why might he have needed so much if it wasn't to pay Annie's killers? We've learned that before he was a suspect, he told people he'd been planning to surprise Annie. His plan? A romantic helicopter trip the next day.
There is this suggestion that it was for a helicopter trip, and it may well be it was for a helicopter trip, but of course the police have not followed that process through.
CCTV from the police file revealed that as Tongo drops Mblombo off at work, the 10,000 rand cost of a helicopter flight is all the staff are talking about. Is this simply coincidence? As Tongo and Mblombo walk in, it becomes clear Mblombo is central to what's being discussed. Are the rich people the Dewanis? And why does Mblombo believe a man is cornered? Does this previously unseen footage answer questions about why Shrien Dewani changed up so much cash? It's in the police files, but have they looked at it closely?
They never stopped and paused and thought about the fact that this conspiracy may have linked back to someone else, and they could have put these things to Shrien Dewani and asked him why he went and got that money, and crucially, where it is now.
After 5 minutes hanging round the Coliseum, Tongo left for the townships to meet the hijackers Kwabe and Umgeni for the first time.
What was discussed was Tongo telling us the husband wants the wife to be killed, and it had to look like a hijacking.
The plan was for Kwabe and Umgeni to hijack the taxi in a township that night. Yet there's no evidence Tongo told Shrien Dewani. We know from phone records in the prosecution file that not once after the gunmen met Zola Tongo did the taxi driver ever call Shrien and tell him the plan to kill Annie was in place for that night. Now, is it really credible that Shrien, a man described by Annie, her family and his own family as a control freak and perfectionist, would have left so much to chance? The night of Annie's death. Shortly after 6, the newlyweds emerge from their room and head for the hotel bar. The couple pose for pictures and kiss each other repeatedly. Meanwhile, over at the Coliseum Hotel, the fixer Mblombo, who's only admitted to putting Tongo and the gunman in touch, is revealed by new CCTV to be far more involved. Phone records show he's talking to Tongo. We've enhanced the sound for translators. What emerges raises serious questions about the decision to grant him immunity. Mblombo seems to be in charge. So why is he still a free man? At the Cape Grace, 7:30 came and went with no sign of Tongo. Shrien Dewani called him.
The driver was delayed, so when he said he was late, we just had another drink and just carried on chatting.
But Tongo and his legal team give a very different account.
Dewani called me in an agitated state to find out where I was.
Dewani demanded to know what the holdup was and insisted that the act be perpetrated, and perpetrated that very day.
This is CCTV of that call. Shrien Dewani's holding his phone to his left ear, Annie's side. He shows no sign of agitation. And according to Tongo, he insists on Annie's murder when she's sat right beside him. Tongo finally arrives half an hour late. If Shrien Dewani is expecting Annie to be killed, he shows no sign of it. He seems happy to take pictures of his wife. They look like lovebirds. Tongo confirms the couple's relaxed mood continued in his taxi.
Both Dewani and the lady appeared to be happy. They laughed a lot. Dewani instructed me to first drive around in town, as he wanted to see what the city looked like at night.
So now he embarks on what should be a pleasant social tour of the city and an evening out, but apparently during the course of this his wife is going to be killed. It almost beggars belief. It's simply not something that most people would find credible.
The hijack was supposed to take place in Guguletu township shortly after Tongo picked the couple up. But Tongo says when he drove by, the gunmen weren't there. Hijacker Kwabe claims they'd agreed to call it off. Yet records in the police docket show calls between the taxi driver, the hijacker, and the middleman at the Coliseum Hotel continued. Moments later, as they arrived at a restaurant in the beach resort of Strand, the taxi driver Tongo claims Shrien Dewani became furious that Annie's murder had not yet happened.
I walked with them to the restaurant. At the entrance, the lady went in, and Dewani turned around and spoke to me. He appeared stressed and threatened me. He said that if the job was not done that evening, he was going to kill me.
Yet this CCTV covers the restaurant entrance. It shows the three of them walking towards the restaurant together. But it's not Annie who heads in first, as Tongo claims. It's Shrien. A waiter has confirmed this to Panorama. And there is no row.
This is a crucial point. So there is a very damning statement made by one co-conspirator of another, Shrien Dewani, which could have been tested to some degree by at least seeing if it was feasible on CCTV.
If the timer on the CCTV is correct, phone records in the police file show that 8 seconds after disappearing from view, Tongo calls the middleman. So in just 8 seconds, Shrien Dewani is supposed to have threatened Tongo and demanded Annie's murder that night.
What we know from the CCTV is that this couldn't have happened. And yet the South African police are either unaware of that or have simply disregarded it.
The hijacker Kwabe, who like Tongo has agreed a plea bargain, says the taxi driver called him.
Tongo told me that he is still in Somerset and that the husband wants the job done that night.
The one he called me and wanted to know if I had arranged for the guys.
Records show Shrien Dewani did call Zola Tongo at 9:56. They spoke for 93 seconds. Shrien's account is more straightforward.
I then called Zola to come back and pick us up. So we came outside the restaurant and he was waiting.
After driving away from the Surfside, the taxi driver claims he texted Shrien about the cash for the hitmen.
I sent him a text message. Don't forget the money. He then answered, by text also, to inform me that the money was in an envelope in a pouch behind the front passenger seat.
While the records in the police files confirm Tongo did text Shrien, we can reveal there is no record of what the text said or that Shrien ever replied.
It's just another example of evidence that apparently incriminates Shrien Dewani from Tongo that has nothing to back it up or appears to be completely untrue. If we had the actual calls themselves, if we had the texts, it would unquestionably, in my mind, completely unlock this case.
But we understand experts can't retrieve the actual text messages, so it seems the South Africans are relying on Tongo's word for what was said.
Driving suggested that we drive through one of the township areas. We had no reason to distrust him at all.
Tongo drove them into the heart of Guguletu and into the hands of Kwabe and Mungeni.
We were scared and stunned. I grabbed Annie and held her tight because she was starting to cry.
I was instructed to open the doors. Kwabe then drove off. I played along as I knew we were not really being hijacked by the men.
Shrien Dewani says Annie didn't want to give up her wedding and engagement rings.
I said, don't worry about the rings, we can always buy new rings, let's just give them everything and get out of here.
Shrien says he handed over all the South African cash he had on him, 4,000 rand, roughly £350. The filmed confession of one of the gunmen, Kolile Mungeni, supports this. His account filmed before Shrien Dewani became a suspect. Not long after the taxi was hijacked, Zola Tongo got out here.
Before Tongo got out, he told us that the money is behind the front passenger seat in a pouch.
The hijackers drove off into the darkness of Khayelitsha Township.
I heard them pleading with us not to harm them.
The driver then said, we just want the car, we're not going to hurt you, but we're going to let you go, but let you go separately.
Again, Mungeni, the only one to reject a plea bargain, confirms Shrien Dewani's account. Shrien and Mungeni had no contact before or after, yet their accounts tally. Around half an hour after the car was hijacked, Shrien was ordered to get out.
I was holding onto her and asked them to let us both go together.
Again, his account mirrors Mungeni's. Why ask the gunman to let them go together if he wanted Annie dead?
They priced us apart. They held a gun to my head and said, either you leave or we'll shoot you.
Shrien Dewani was now alone in a township notorious for gun violence.
The car just sped off and my heart was racing.
Luckily, he stumbled into this man, local government auditor Simbonile Matokazi.
He was pacing up and down the road here in panic, and he was sort of like shaking. I thought he was crying.
Simbonile called his cousin, a police officer. He says Shrien became frantic. Police took so long to arrive.
When I found out that he was accused, I was a bit surprised because I don't think this guy had killed his wife. You know.
After a fruitless search for Annie, police took Shrien Dewani back to the Cape Grace Hotel. He looks like a distraught man on previously unseen CCTV, shuttling back and forth from the couple's room to police who gathered in the hotel's internet room. The taxi driver Tongo was also at the hotel.
I heard the policeman referring to the lady as Dewani's wife. That was the first time that I realized that the lady that Dewani wanted us to murder was his wife.
So he'd no idea Annie was Shrien's wife, even though he'd picked them up from the airport and driven them around for hours?
The police had told us all night that it's about robbing and taking the car, and so we were all convinced that Annie would be found alive.
That Mungeni shot Annie. His recollection seems at odds with this being a planned murder.
The shot I wasn't expecting, so it gave me quite a fright, you see.
Mungeni claims it was Kwabe who took the gun, went to the rear passenger door and shot Annie in a struggle for her handbag. The gunman dumped the car here in Khayelitsha Township, leaving Annie lying across the back seats. They stole her handbag, the couple's mobile phones, designer watches and jewellery. Police valued the haul at £8,000, 6 times the price of the alleged hit. 2 of Annie's rings were recovered, one beneath her body, and her £25,000 engagement ring hidden in the rear seat. If this was murder made to look like robbery, why not take the rings? If it was simply an execution, wouldn't the hitman have stayed to check Annie was dead?
Did you establish if she was alive or not? No. Is there something else you want to show me?
The South Africans claim the forensic evidence proves Annie was cowering against the back seat, and Mungeni took aim from the front passenger seat. So they claim he deliberately shot her, with the gun barrel 5 to 10 centimeters from her body, which means her death was not an accident. We asked leading forensic scientists to review all the evidence in the police docket. Would it stand up to scrutiny? Was Annie cowering back in her seat, as the South Africans claim?
Was Annie in a defensive position when she was shot?
There's no pathological evidence to support that, no.
Home Office pathologist Dr. Shepherd takes a very different view to the South Africans.
There is no evidence of any blood spatter against the seat around the site of recovery of the bullet. If you'd been pushed back against it, as the bullet exited her body, it would have caused damage and spatter around that point, and there isn't any. So she's leaning forward or sitting forward on the edge of the seat. It surprises me that the scenes of crime people have not considered it.
And we have a pink rod going through the hand.
If Annie was leaning forwards, can the South Africans be sure the gun was held at a distance from her?
The size and shape of that pattern of soot on the back of her hand would indicate a very close range, potentially less than 5 centimetres. But it is possible.
Until its closure last year, Mark Mastaglio was the leading firearms expert at the Home Office Forensic Science Service.
If we take your analysis of the facts, it makes it look more likely that this gun went off in a struggle where it was right up against her. Is that right?
I think that's a fair statement. What the South Africans have not done is to carry out any experiments to support the conclusions that they came to. They've made some guesses.
It was sloppy.
I think this is a major flaw in the investigation.
And what about the murder weapon? Could it have gone off accidentally?
There seems to have been no examination of the pistol to determine whether it was susceptible or had a propensity for accidental discharge. Could it go off in a struggle, for instance? There are standard tests you carry out. All we have is a blanket statement that the gun was in working order.
If tests were not done to rule out accidental shooting, does the post-mortem evidence support the South African view that Annie's death was deliberate, and if so, a planned murder?
If it was a deliberate shot, I'd have expected a shot in the head, maybe over the heart, not one that struck the neck. It's an unusual place for an assassination. So, on that basis alone, and it's a very weak bit of evidence, I would veer towards an accidental discharge rather than a deliberate shooting.
Last November, Kolile Mungeni was found guilty of being the man who shot Annie.
The accused could barely avoid the avalanche of evidence proven by the state to come crashing upon him.
Despite his filmed confession, Mungeni had pleaded not guilty and denied being involved. He was jailed for life without parole.
Yes, it's relatively easy to do that.
But are the South Africans right to say the forensics prove Mungeni was Annie's killer? Was the gunman in the front passenger seat?
If the conclusion is, they're saying it's a certainty he was sitting in that front passenger seat, no, there are other equally likely options. I think legitimate criticism can be levelled because they haven't considered alternative propositions.
So could the driver Kwabe, given a plea bargain by the state, have been the gunman?
Annie is looking towards the driver's side of the car. Is she looking actually out of the door? I don't know, but she's looking that way at the time she's shot.
Did the South Africans miss opportunities to put the identity of Annie's killer beyond doubt? It seems they failed to collect properly or even to analyze all the forensic samples taken from the taxi for traces of gunshot residue.
Who had the gun, who fired the gun, were they in the front seat, were they sitting in the back of the vehicle? We don't know on the evidence that we've seen. We might do the door frame.
One of the UK's leading experts on gunshot residue, Angela Shaw, found no evidence the hijacker's hands or clothes were tested. But it's the lack of sampling in the taxi that concerns her most.
The samples that they did analyse were taken from the rear seat and from the inside of the door panels. This really does not provide enough information to establish where the firer might have been sitting in the car.
So you're saying that when a gun is fired, clues go everywhere, and a lot of them weren't even looked at?
In this instance, no, there was a very limited approach.
So you've got, on the face of it, a modern technological organisation, but in fact it's a policing system that is content to use confessions and individual witness evidence against others. And all we know in this country is that we've had some very big miscarriages from cases of this type.
When the gunman abandoned the taxi, they say they fled into nearby scrubland to split the takings, but disagree on how much they got.
Suspect is signing.
The driver Kwabe gave his version of the money trail last year in return for his plea bargain.
Mungeni took the money out from the pouch behind the passenger seat. we found that it was 10,000 rand, not 15,000. We split it half-half.
But Mngeni makes no mention of the 10,000 rand. The only one of the accused not to claim Shrien Dewani was paying them says they shared only the cash they stole from him at gunpoint. And there's evidence to support that, as Mngeni spent just under 2,000 rand on trainers and clothes the day after Annie's killing. So what happened to the missing 10,000?
It's not at all clear if this money was in the vehicle, despite lots of talk about it being in the cubbyhole. The money just simply has never been seen anywhere along the line.
New CCTV from Sunday morning shows Shrien taking the call telling him Annie was dead.
When we found out that Annie had been shot, apparently I just started screaming hysterically and dropped the phone.
Police, a doctor and family friends were with Shrien in the moments after he learned his wife was gone.
I was just so hysterical when they told me that. I don't know, I just couldn't think straight. So the hotel doctor gave me some medication. The police wouldn't let me see her.
The cameras capture Shrien's shifting emotions in the hours after Annie's death. Some 10 hours afterwards, smiling on the phone to a friend. Next day, his distress visible as he leaves for the mortuary to identify Annie's body. Before leaving South Africa, Shrien Dewani had one final meeting with Zola Tongo. Seen here in white, the driver was still a witness, not a suspect.
I met up with Dewani, where I received 1,000 rand as payment for my role in orchestrating the murder.
Holding a white plastic bag, Shrien meets him in the lobby, and they enter the internet room, which has no cameras, although other guests are in there. After just over a minute, Shrien leaves, minus the bag. Tongo, 10 seconds later, with the bag under his shirt. He heads straight to the gents.
The bag contained an envelope which contained 1,000 rand. I realized that Dewani had not paid me the full 5,000 rand as we previously agreed.
Tongo left the hotel with the bag in clear view. He says he went looking for Shrien, having realized he'd been shortchanged. But CCTV reveals that to be untrue.
I had no further contact with Dewani after that.
Another lie. Phone records and CCTV show Shrien called him an hour and 40 minutes after giving him the bag. Tongo's testimony makes no mention of that 54-second call. That's the 6th time the CCTV contradicts crucial evidence in his sworn statement. So was Shrien Dewani shortchanging the man who'd organized Annie's murder? Or was the 1,000 rand, £90, simply payment for his services as a taxi driver? Tongo was arrested a week after Annie's death. The very next day, the taxi driver agreed a plea bargain with prosecutors, a lesser sentence in return for evidence against Shrien Dewani. The speed surprised some senior legal figures.
It seemed to me that the prosecution service was under some political pressure to get a result as soon as possible.
Even Tongo's jail sentence was agreed that weekend. 7 years off a 25-year sentence. He could be out in 2020. Annie's father had still to approve the deal.
The prosecutor asked me, Vinod, do you approve of this if he tells the truth? I said, yes, I want to know the truth. What happened to my Annie?
Just 2 weeks after Tongo's arrest, the South African High Court rubber-stamped it all.
You are effectively sentenced to 18 years direct imprisonment. The court will adjourn.
Shrien was now officially a suspect. Tongo's lawyer is satisfied South Africa's National Prosecuting Authority, or NPA, acted properly.
The NPA must be satisfied that it's sending the right message, and the judge, of course, at the end has to endorse that it is, in fact, in the interest of justice.
Others are wary.
A sentence was imposed without ever seeking to check the veracity of the allegations against the other conspirators.
In South Africa, things are not happening as they should. I don't believe the prosecuting authorities are checking up on their evidence beforehand. It's like, we've got to nail somebody, so let's just go for it.
But why apparently so little interest in establishing whether the taxi driver and the hotel receptionist were telling the truth? Could fears for South African tourism have played a part?
It is certainly a far preferable outcome to have a finding that this was a murder that was arranged between Tsonga and a foreign visitor, rather than evidence of rampant criminality in Cape Town.
We put all our findings to the South African authorities. They say it would be improper to engage with Panorama on the merits of the case, as trial by media would violate Shrien Dewani's right to a fair trial.
But we want to assure all our people in South Africa and around the world that our justice system is fair and Mr. Dewani will get a fair trial.
Shrien Dewani remains sectioned under the Mental Health Act, as he has been since 5 months after Annie's death. In July, a British judge ruled that while not yet fit to plead, he should return to South Africa, where there are no juries, to stand trial. He's appealing. If convicted, he faces life imprisonment. The key witnesses? 3 men, all involved in Annie's killing, who've all done deals with the state.
If you were him, would you go anywhere near South Africa?
I wouldn't, not given the quality of investigation that I've seen by the South African police.
Annie's family have publicly condemned this program as trial by TV. They want Shrien Dewani tried in the South African courts.
He must give us the answers. He must go to South Africa and tell us what happened and why. Every single day is a nightmare for us. It's a big torture.
The CCTV shows Shrien Dewani leaving the room he shared with Annie for the last time. Within weeks, he would be a public hate figure, identified as the man who'd ordered his wife's murder on their honeymoon. Clearly, there are questions for Shrien Dewani to answer. But can justice be done? Or has it already been undone by incompetence, flawed evidence, and lies?